Well, now that the precons have been revealed, it's time to start looking at upgrades for them. Let's start off with the Veloci-Ramp-Tor Precon. This is the white, green, red dinosaur deck, and we're going to go through and cut some cards, add some cards, and talk about some of the new stuff. Now, I'm not going to go over like in the past where I've gone over every single card I want to cut out and the reasons for cutting them, because everybody's reasons for cutting things are different. So I'm just going to put those cuts in the description below. And while you're down there, if you want, go ahead and like, comment, subscribe, and all that good fun stuff that YouTube loves. And let's get into it. Let's start off with the brand new cards that are coming in this precon. So we're going to have a couple of choices here for the commander. The front-facing commander is Pantalaza Sunfavored. For 2, a red, green, and a white, you get a 4/4 dinosaur that says when it or another dinosaur enters the battlefield under your control, you can discover X, where X is that creature's toughness, but this only triggers once each turn. So this employs the new Discover mechanic, which gives you free spells, but it's based off of the toughness of the dinosaur or Pantalaza herself. So that's going to give us some options to get some free spells, especially since a lot of the dinosaurs are high CMC. So you're going to be able to flip some pretty good sized spells off of some of our other dinosaurs that are in the deck by default. We're also going to add some big ones to it as well. The other option that we have is Weta Trainer Prodigy. For red, green, white. You get a 1/5 human warrior with haste. 2 and a green tap, target creature you control fights another target creature. This ability costs 2 less if it targets 2 creatures that you control. And if a creature you control being dealt damage causes its triggered ability to trigger, it triggers an additional time. So this is really good with the old enraged dinosaurs from the original Ixalan. What you can do is target 2 of your enraged dinosaurs, have them fight each other, and as long as they survive through the fight ability, and that you're going to get double triggers off of each one of those dinosaurs in order to just kind of bend this to its best potential. That said, for my purposes, I think I'm just going to stick with Pantalaza and keep her in the front of the deck, but Weta is still in the deck as part of the package of removal. So now let's take a look at some of the brand new cards that are exclusive to the precon and see what we can do with this. First up is Bronzebeak Foragers. For 3 and a white, you get a 3/4 dinosaur that exiles up to 1 target non-land permanent for each opponent you control until this leaves the battlefield, and you can pay X and a white to put a card that was exiled mana value X with this into its owner's graveyard, and you gain X life. So you can basically eat something of theirs and have this thing poop it out into their graveyard eventually. So it's kind of a neat slow roll removal. If they don't get rid of this right away, their thing is going to go into the graveyard where they may not be able to get it back by the end of the game. Then we have Sunfrill Imitator. For 2 and a green, 3/3 dinosaur. Whenever it attacks, you can have it become a copy of another dinosaur you control, except for it is still named Sunfrill Imitator and has the ability to copy another one when it attacks. So this does not end until the end of turn. It becomes a copy and it stays a copy of whatever that creature happens to be. Obviously, you don't want to copy legendary creatures with this because the legend rule still applies, but you're going to copy some of your other big dinosaurs that have triggers and rage things, all these other things they have going on in the deck. You can copy it with the Sunfrill Imitator and take it up from being a 3/3 to, like a 9/9 or whatever happens to be the creature that you're copying with it. So it's a decent early play as just a 3/3, but it can get really out of control where you're copying bigger, better things later down the line. Then this is Wrathful Raptors. For 4 and a red, you get a 5/5 trampling dinosaur that says whenever a dinosaur you control is dealt damage, it deals that much damage to any target that isn't a dinosaur. If you remember back last year when the D&D Commander Legends 2 set was printed, there's Wrathful Red Dragon in that set. It's a 5/5 flying dragon that has basically the same ability on it, but it's keyworded to dragons. So in this case, you're going to have a dinosaur that flings damage back at stuff. So if they're going to block your dinosaurs, there's going to be a lot of damage being reflected either in their face or onto their creatures that either didn't block or to finish off creatures that did block. Then we have one of the new 3-mana rocks they've been trying to improve, Progenitor's Icon. For 3 colorless, you get an artifact that taps for any color, and when it enters the battlefield, you choose a creature type, and then you can tap it, and the next spell of a chosen type you cast this turn can be cast as though it had flash. This is a great ability to have on here because even though you're not going to get the mana off of this, you're going to have the ability to flash in one of your bigger threats or whatever, try to sneak it in under counter magic, sneak it under board removals or whatever they may be sitting on. Maybe they tap out thinking you don't have a threat, and then you flash in a big dinosaur, and all of a sudden it's like, oh crap, and they've been tapped out, and what do? You just run them over. Now, aside from some of the new cards that are showing up in the precon, let's take a look at some of the really good reprints that are actually going to be showing up in this thing. These precons actually have a very good amount of reprint equity attached to them, so that makes them much more worthwhile. Even if you already own a lot of the cards, like you already have a dinosaur deck, it may be worth your while to even pick up this precon because of the reprints that are attached to it. So let's take a look. First up is Apex Altasaur. For 7 green, you get a 10/10 dinosaur that when it enters the battlefield, it fights up to one target creature you don't control, and it has an enrage counter that when it's dealt damage, it fights up to one target creature you don't control. So you can actually just chain force fights until it's either dead or you've nuked out all their stuff, and you'll be left with a 10/10 dinosaur. So this is a really good dinosaur, and it currently goes for around $13. We're also seeing basically 2 reprints of Carnage Tyrant. There's one in the precon, and there's also one in the special guest slots with an alternative art to it. 4 green, 7/6 dinosaur that can't be countered with trample and hexproof. This was a finisher back in the Ixalan block originally when it was first printed, because it's just really freaking hard to get rid of. You can't target it with removal as an opponent. You can't counter it as a control player. So unless you had a board wipe to nuke this thing off the board, it was going to stick around for quite a while and just run your opponents over. So it makes a good return here, and currently is going for about $8, so this ought to bring the price down to a more reasonable cost. Next up is Xenagos, God of Revels. For 3, a red and a green, we have a 6/5 God with indestructible. Is not a creature unless you have 7 or more mana pips for its devotion, and at the beginning of combat on your turn, another creature gets +X/+X and haste equal to its power. Now, this card is not included in my upgrade list. While being a very good card, it's an off theme for what I wanted to do with the deck. However, it is a very good reprint to see, because currently it is going for about $11 online, and it has not seen a reprint in quite a while. So this is actually good to see, and we'll get it into more players' hands. Then we have a card that actually shocked me for how expensive it is. It's Chandra's Ignition. For 3 red, you get a sorcery. Target creature you control deals damage equal to its power to each other creature and each opponent. Well, our dinosaurs are really, really big, so this thing is going to basically blow up the board and leave like one big dinosaur behind, and be able to just nuke everything else and hit our opponents in the face for the power of whatever dinosaur you target. Now, this is, like I said before, the surprising part here is this card is going for around $18 right now. So this is a really good reprint to see in a Commander precon. Now, this card I'm also going to leave in the precon, even though it's a Ravnica set card. I'm hoping it gets new art. It's Rhythm of the Wild. I just felt that the theme of it fit the dinosaurs very well, so we're going to leave it in. For 1 red, you get an enchantment. Creature spells you control cannot be countered, and non-token creatures have Riot. So you can either give them haste when they come in or a counter when they come in. So, give your big dinosaurs haste and run your opponent over as quickly as possible. It's just a really good card. And surprisingly, it's going for around $5 as an uncommon, so it's nice to see a good reprint for it. Now, this card is controversial because of who painted the art. This is Descendant's Path. For 2 and a green, you get an enchantment. At the beginning of your upkeep, reveal the top card of your library. If it's a creature card that shares a creature type with a creature you control, that's a mouthful, you can cast that card without paying its mana cost, otherwise put it on the bottom of your library. So there was a big to-do a couple years back with Therese Nielsen. She said some stuff that wasn't very kosher, and people are trying to replace the art on her cards, but there's some cards like Descendant's Path where your only other option was a Secret Lair printing they did a year ago or so, and it's really expensive to buy that copy. It's like a $30 copy. So I'm hoping we get a nice new art for this that matches the Ixalan themes and will get us away from this art if you want to get away from this art. Otherwise, though, this is still a really good card. You get a dinosaur at the beginning of your upkeep. As long as you have another dinosaur, and you can just flip it off your deck and boom, you're off to the races. So if you have like a 3-drop dinosaur and then all of a sudden you're like, hey, here's Galta, slam, go. It's kind of a good card for this deck. And then we have what people got really upset was not in the Commander Masters printing here back a couple months ago. It's a Chroma's Will. For 3 and a white, you get an instant. Choose one. If you control a commander as you cast the spell, do both. Creatures you control gain flying, vigilance, and double strike until end of turn, or creatures you control gain lifelink, indestructible, and protection from all colors until end of turn, also known as you win the game, because this is a finisher, and an expensive one at that, currently going for around $20 to $25 online, and has only seen this one printing. So this is really, really good and should knock the price of it down pretty significantly. Now, with that said, all these reprints that are actually in this particular precon actually make up the entire cost of the precon before ever actually factoring in that you get all these other cards and all these new cards that are exclusive to the precon, that some of those are also going for high prices as well, but the reprints themselves go for more than $50. So if you can find this precon for 50 or less, I highly recommend picking it up simply for these reprints alone, let alone the new cards and the theme of the deck. Now, let's get into what I'm doing with this deck. I'm upgrading it to match the Ixalan themes, which is what I tend to do when I have the availability of cards to go in the decks. So that's what I want to do here. I want to pull stuff out that doesn't really fit the Ixalan theme, and I want to push the deck towards that and make it more thematic as well as more fun. So let's take a look at those cards now. So for whatever reason, they neglected to put any variation of Galta in this deck. So we're going to start off by putting 3 different variations of Galta in this deck, including her original printing, Galta Primal Hunger, for 10 green, 12/12 Elder Dinosaur, costs X less to cast equal to the total power of creatures you control, and it has Trample. This is just like big, beefy dinosaur beats that more often than not, you're not going to be paying 12, you're going to be paying like 2 to 4 mana, and you're going to get a 12/12 beater on the board. Then we have the variation from March of the Machine, Galta and Maverin. For 3 green, white, you get a 12/12 dinosaur vampire with trample that says when you attack, choose one. Create a tapped and attacking XX green dinosaur creature token with trample, where X is the greatest power among other attacking creatures, or create X11 white vampire tokens with lifelink, where X is the number of other attacking creatures. In this deck, you're probably going to want to pick the dinosaur variation because we're not going to have quite as many go wide options here, but you're going to have a lot of big, beefy stuff that's going to slam on in and create you another really big dinosaur that is attacking, and it's just going to give it nice, big, fat trample as well. Then we have the brand new one that's coming in the main set, Galta Stampede Tyrant. For 5 triple green, you get a 12/12 Elder Dinosaur with trample that says when it enters the battlefield, put any number of creature cards from your hand onto the battlefield. So this gives you just basically a free license to slam dinosaurs down when this enters the battlefield. However, it is very expensive as the time of pre-order. It's going anywhere between $19.99 all the way up. I've seen it as $29.99, depending on the site you go to. So if you don't want to spend the money now, either wait and see how far down this comes down, because again, I'm not sure. My best guess is it's probably going to go down around $15 once the cards start getting open, because it will be popular with dinosaur decks. It will be popular possibly in standard if there is a dinosaur deck to be had. And outside of that, I really don't see it seeing a lot of play, so I'm thinking it's going to land around that $15 mark, but don't be paying $30 pre-release prices for this thing just yet. I don't think it's worth that kind of money. And since they're reprinting this with brand new art, let's kick in Gishath's Son's Avatar, which is basically the original commander for a deck like this. 5 red, green, white, dinosaur avatar, 7/6, with vigilance, trample, and haste. And when it deals combat damage to a player, reveal that many cards from the top of your library, and put any number of dinosaur cards from among the revealed cards onto the battlefield, and the rest on the bottom of your library in a random order. Now, normally this card drives me insane in Historic Brawl and in even Commander as the front-facing card. However, being part of the 99, I'm not quite as against seeing it in the deck. Now, if you have a lower power range of decks in your playgroup, you may not want to slot this into your deck, because this is a very powerful card and can take over a game all on its own by slamming somebody who's open that wasn't expecting it and revealing 7 cards, and you can reveal up to 7 dinosaurs off the top of your deck. Now, the chances of that happening are very slim, but it can happen, and you can basically flip a game over where you might have only had 1 or 2 cards, and all of a sudden your board is the dominating threat out of nowhere. Also coming out of the main set is Pugnacious Hammerskull. For 2 and a green, you get a 6/6 dinosaur that says when it attacks, if you don't control another dinosaur, put a stun counter on this. Well, we're going to have dinosaurs, so it's a 6/6 for 3 for us, so it's cheap beef to beat our opponents with, help us work with our other dinosaur synergies, and just is a really good card in general. Then I'm going to dip back into the March of the Machine for Rampaging Raptor. For 2 red, you get a 4/4 dinosaur with trample and haste. 2 in a red, it gets +2/+0 until end of turn, and when it deals combat damage to an opponent, it deals that much damage to target planeswalker that player controls or a battle that they control. Now, battles aren't, that big a thing in Commander. You might see them once in a while, but it's more for that planeswalker damage, and it's also a nice, hasty, mid-range threat for us to slam on the board and keep on swinging through. Returning to the main set, let's take a look at Scytheclaw Raptor. For 2 in a red, you get a 4/3 dinosaur that says whenever a player casts a spell, if it is not on their turn, this will deal 4 damage to them. So, counterspell players, want you to be put on notice. I don't like you counterspelling my stuff. I like to play my deck. I like to do my thing. And with you sitting back on counterspell mana every single turn, I don't like that. So this is going to come in and punish you for messing with people's plans, and I am fully endorsing that plan. So I plan on playing this in a lot of decks, not necessarily just dinosaur decks, but any kind of red deck that I am playing, this will probably see play in it. And I'm wanting to pair it with some damage triplers as well to really put on the pain. Also coming from the new set is Bone Horde Dracosaur. For 3 red, you get a 5/5 dinosaur dragon with flying and first strike. And at the beginning of your upkeep, exile the top 2 cards of your library. You can play them this turn, and if you exile a land card this way, create a 3/1 dinosaur token, and if you exile a non-land, create a treasure token. So either way, we're going to be expanding our dinosaurs with little 3/1s, or we're going to create treasures which can help us ramp into our even bigger dinosaurs. And I just like that it's a nice flying threat. We're in a deck that is mostly ground pounders, so it's nice to have an on-theme dinosaur that can take to the skies for us. And the last card that we're going to slot in here could be a little controversial because some people don't like this card. It's Zetalpa Primal Conqueror, 5 red, Elder Dinosaur 7/7 with trample. That when it enters the battlefield, you exile the top card of each player's library until they exile a non-land card, and you can cast any number of spells from among those cards exiled this way without paying their mana costs. And then 9 and a Phyrexian green to transform it, and it flips over into Zetalpa Primal Sickness, the 11/11 Phyrexian Elder Dinosaur with trample and indestructible, and for whatever amount of combat damage it deals, they get that many poison counters. So most people play this to abuse the ever-living crap out of the ETB side of Italy and steal people's stuff and win games that way. This deck is not built around that theme. This deck is built just to play it as a simple dinosaur in the deck, and if you get to flip it over, then you get a really big nightmare for your opponents that aren't playing exile-based removal. And on top of that, sometimes you'll get a free spell off of your opponents that might actually do something good for us. And there are a couple of things in the deck to get dinosaurs out of our graveyard, so if it dies in combat, gets removed, or gets countered or whatever along the way, there are chances for you to get it back and reuse the ETB as well. So aside from the 9 cards that I ripped out of the deck and added to it, I went ahead and fiddled with the land base. I'm not going to go over those cards. You can look in the deck list down in the description below. And as always, thank you guys for watching. Again, like, comment, subscribe if you like what I'm doing here with this stuff. We're going to have the next video here in the next couple of days. I think it's going to be the Merfolk deck coming up.